So I've seen from some friends and also just looking around the internet on YouTube, there has been some recent discussion about where Zap falls as far as the gags are concerned in Corporate Clash. Is it something good to pick up? Is it weak? And what is the justification behind it? And I've had a lot of experience using Zap and playing with and without Zap on the Clash servers. I've raised a few tunes. One of them I got to 134 with someone else multi-tuning some of that, and then one of them I got to like the 120s, again with a little bit of help. So what I want to talk about is the situations where I think Zap is legitimately good and or the best in slot that you can get, as well as many situations where it's simply not very good. And I also have not watched any of the other videos made on this topic, in part because I don't want to be biased. I want to give my own opinion based on my experience playing. And it doesn't mean my opinion's the only one that's right, but I think it should be considered. So, if nothing else, what I would appreciate for people watching is just listen to what I have to say, compare to what other people have said, and see what seems the most reasonable to you. So, to start with, let's jump right into it, where I think there are three primary factors that determine how useful Zap's going to be. The first one is you need a team that's strategic. The more strategic your team is, the better Zap is going to go. Secondly, you need a team that is organized. The more organized your team is, the better Zap's going to be. And then thirdly, the more people that have Prestige Squirt and Prestige Zap, the better Zap's going to be. And if these three factors are not present, it's not very useful. So, right off the bat, that eliminates a ton of potential uses for Zap, let's be clear. You need these three factors in pretty high proximity. If all three of them are very high, which is totally possible under some circumstances, Zap can be really good. But without these, it has a lot of flaws, and will probably not serve you well to choose. Those are my 2 cents. So, second point is that ultimately Zap, in my opinion, is actually OP in certain circumstances, and those circumstances are if you play with the exact same group of friends for pretty much everything, is the first one of those circumstances. So let's say if I'm playing with the same pre-made group of 4 or 8 pretty much every time I'm on the game, if I have a very set group of people, we're always going to play together, we're always going to coordinate, I think in that situation, Zap is a super good choice, because when done optimally with a team with all setting up around it, Zap is really, really good. But that's not a given at all. And that's not the way everybody likes to play. Some people like to go with randoms, some people just have only the option to go with randoms. So, but it is worth knowing, if you have a very organized team, Zap is extremely good. But that, again, relies on going with the same people pretty much every time. And the second time where Zap is really good, the time that I used much more than the first, is the following scenario. If you multi-box, so what I mean by that is you run 2 of your own tunes through stuff. Let's say I'm using a second tune to go through buildings or facilities. If I'm multi-boxing, running 2 of my own tunes through stuff, Zap is extremely good. In fact, this might be the best use of it in the entire game. And I'll include some footage in this video of me duoing some buildings, facilities, I think, on my 2 tunes of Zap, and showing off just how potent and powerful this combination can be, because I think it's extremely good, and I would like to give some good examples of instances where I can show that. And so, what I mean by this essentially is that Zap is really good as like this sort of extra AoE sound replacement, but the times it ends up being most useful are these kind of specific instances. It's extremely easy to combo Zap with 2 people. And what it allows you to do is, like, anytime you're in a building or facility, there's 3 left. Assuming they're not like all level 18, you can just take out that middle one of Squirt and then just zap the other 2 and they're all gone in 1 round. And unless you want to spam sound more than you're able to spam sound, or only restrict yourself to very low levels of cogs you can fight, that's a circumstance you could not do as many times without the Prestige Squirt and Zap on both tunes. And you'll find in this game, for pretty much everything, up until like the super endgame stuff, Prestige Squirt and Zap, along with your Prestige sound, just kind of melts through the whole game when you're multi-tuning, running 2. And I was able to like get all my promotions done with just this setup really easily, didn't have to sweat it, and it definitely saved me objectively a lot of rounds and a lot of time. And also just made it easier and stronger because I could still utilize other gags if I needed to. So, what I will say is that Zap has a lot of use for that specific scenario and should be heavily considered for that specific scenario, in my opinion. And then The next point I want to make is that Zap is a pretty good choice for soloing, assuming you also have Prestige Squirt. And so essentially, if you go a Zap build, you're not going to be like crippled for soloing. It has its pretty good use in soloing. The way it functions is a little bit better on lower level cogs than higher level ones, because you're going to want to, like lower level cogs, take out one of Squirt or get a low of Squirt, and then use Zap to take out either 2 or 3 depending on which of those combos you used. And there's various combos you can use, but legitimately, especially if you're not doing like back 9s or CEOs, Zap has a lot of good uses for soloing. But I will make the point, I don't think Zap is necessarily better than Prestige Lure or Throw or Drop Hard for soloing. I think it has its efficiencies, and I think it can be, in many situations, close to as good as those, or better in some, but there are definitely some good situations you could come up with, and purely for a survivability standpoint, Lure and Throw, both prestiged for soloing, is probably a bit better. And there are certain scenarios that are very high-level single target cogs where, again, those are just better. But I don't think your toon has to be crippled for soloing, and you'll get a lot of use out of these in soloing, should that be your focus. Because I'm a somewhat solo-focused player, and I thought I should throw that in. And then the next point I want to make is that Zap is generally very, very weak when coordinating with random players from the Clash Discord. I don't care what anybody says. If you're just going with random people, you're probably going to have a bad experience trying to use Zap with them. Because most of the time, they're not going to have Zap, they're going to use it really improperly, they're not going to understand what they need to do, or they're not going to have the gag trained enough, or they're not going to have it prestiged. And so in my opinion, I legitimately will say most of the time if you're just going for randoms, Zap ends up being more of a headache than a use. And it sucks, but the reality is, by far, Zap is like the hardest thing to use in this game, and you're not going to be able to realistically expect random players to use it properly consistently. So I would say you need to understand that a lot of battles you're in, especially the lower level you are, or like the more random or casual like players you're going with, a lot of people just won't be able to play with Zap. They won't have the combos to align with you. They won't want to play with Zap, or they're not going to know how. And so in my opinion, it's a poor choice to use if you're going to be consistently grouping with randoms. And that should be understood and acknowledged. Without acknowledging and understanding this, you can't have a realistic view of the strengths and weaknesses of Zap. And the next point I want to go into is that when Zap isn't used properly, it's really bad. So what I mean by this is when people will steal your jump by using a really weak Zap on another cog, when people won't prestige their gags properly, when people don't know the proper combos, when people get stuck and lost and have no idea or direction what to use in circumstances. And some of these things can be a bit nuanced to figure out if you haven't put a little bit of thought into them or been taught. So point being is that if you just want to relax and you're not wanting to either figure out yourself these more complex mechanics or expect randoms to, not choosing Zap is like a totally good choice in my opinion, because there's a lot of headache involved and there's a lot of circumstances where, again, it just won't be used properly and it'll be weaker than all the other options. That should just be understood and acknowledged. So my next point is that Zap is probably not worth choosing for a casual player who plays with mostly random people and doesn't multi-tune. So if you're just playing the game, sorry, my chair is creaking a little bit, that's my bad, but if you're just playing with random people, you just want a single tune, you just want to go through this, and you want to be able to basically play with whoever you're with for the most part, choosing Zap is probably not that good of a choice. Maybe you want to prestige Squirt, so if other people use Zap, you can go along with it, but picking up Zap itself for playing with randoms, most of the time that Zap track is not going to come in that much handy. And it's going to probably be more of a headache than a benefit, most of the time if you're just literally going with the people off Clash Discord. Unless things have greatly changed, there's too many circumstances where people won't know what to do, will be confused, can't help you. It's not really the track where it's the go-to if you're just going to random people. Now, there are a lot of people that are maxed or towards the higher end content that do know how to play with Zap and will use it. But even those people consistently, I remember getting frustrated by just how often that stuff didn't work out how they were hoping it would in random play. So, honestly, my true view is if you're playing with randoms, Zap is not a great choice. If that's your primary goal, is just go in, play one account, and not play with play with randoms, don't go Zap. I think it's probably not that good. Now my next point is if Zap is probably worth choosing if you want to efficiently multi-tune or play with a coordinated, constant team of players. So straight up, if you're going to do a game with 2 of your own tunes, getting Prestige, Squirt, and Zap on both of them, like that just is so good. If your goal is to just get through the entire game really efficiently running your 2 accounts, like because in this game multi-tuning is actually pretty efficient and good use due to the population. It really helped me out a lot when I was playing the game. And my experience has been, if you want to run even 2 is a great number for Zap and Squirt, then I would totally consider going for them. It's actually just the best thing in the game for those circumstances. And also, if you're going to play with like a group of friends a lot of the time, you're going to get insane use out of Zap if all of you know how to use it. It's really good. So, also, if you just think Zap is a cool gag, if you like the concept, there's certain circumstances where it just feels really satisfying to use when everything works out really efficiently. So, I think those are all your best reasons for choosing Zap. In theory, it's a really good gag, but the problem is it relies on elements of teamwork and coordination and consistently everybody choosing it more than like people have. It's not as though the overwhelming meta of the game is if you don't choose Zap, you're like bad. Like the problem is you can't dictate what random people are going to use. Now sound pretty much everybody has, because that's just like a super obvious, easy thing to use. Sound is literally face roll. And really strong in this game too, by the way. Definitely take Prestige Sound. But the problem with Zap is it just doesn't do things well unless everyone has it and is on the same page. But, of course, it has those really, really good circumstances that are the reason why all my tunes have Zap, because I always liked running 2. I always liked playing with, like, a relatively fixed group of people. Like, I would end up going with similar people a lot of the time. And these factors meant it was really good for me. And I enjoyed using it. And I enjoyed being able to do my building duos and my mint duos really quickly. And I found it fun. So, yeah, for me, it was a pretty easy choice. But for you, again, I think it's very dependent on what you want to do in the game. Pretty much all the gags in Clash have use. The main thing comes down to what you most want to do. You're not going to be crippled. I mean, I guess if you're doing group play, you'll be a little crippled without sound, but basically your tune has pretty good, strong uses in some circumstances no matter what you take. There's no situation where you can just make a tune that's like objectively terrible in all cases. And then finally, just my final point to throw in is Zap is kind of a neutral choice for a solo player. I would say that if you took a Zap setup, it's not going to like mean you can't solo as well as like other tunes. It's not going to make or break your soloing setup. So if that's your concern, you're probably going to be about neutral overall in strength and soloing. And like if you really wanted to solo, you could go Prestige, Lure, Prestige, Throw. I will say that I think Prestige, Lure, Throw has similar overall usage in groups as Squirt and Zap, better in some cases, worse than others. It's also a situational thing because you're not always going to be throwing. Like, it just depends. One of my main tunes is Throwless, and the reason for that is because I find that in pretty much every instance I can do a very useful thing for the team. Something I find meaningful, useful, productive, fun. Like, I have very few turns where I feel useless not having Throw. But again, that is very circumstantial. I would say most of the things in this game are circumstantial, and it's always going to be about the people you play with, what do they take. And unless you leave off sound, you can pretty much be okay with any gag setup, in my opinion. Like, the main thing to consider with Zap is just its multi-target ability. Something like Throw is incredibly efficient in this game, especially with the Prestige Lure option. And of course with Prestige Throw, we will fill that one in as well, but I think most people mathematically would understand Prestige Lure is better than Prestige Throw. Because you get a flat, like, I think it's a 10% boost from Prestige Lure. Or is it 15? I don't know. But you get essentially the same or a better flat boost from Prestige Lure as you do for the boost from Throw, which is only for your Throw. So if you're only going to take one, you'd always want to take Prestige Lure, and really Lure Prestige by itself, you don't really need the Prestige Throw, but you could. Point being is Throw is definitely very efficient on lured cogs, single target. The main thing you have to decide is that efficiency worth the trade-off of only hitting one cog at a time? And it's very circumstantial. You can be okay either way. For me, when I was just progressing through the game, I usually found the Squirt and Zap combos better when I could coordinate what everybody used. But the Throw combos are much easier to execute. You're going to find the majority of tunes have Throw. You will run into like a decent amount of Throwless tunes just because they want to be edgelords like my second tune is, which might complicate things. But it's all really depends more, I would say. The strength and weakness of these gags is not as important as the meta, what people tend to take. I don't have the exact statistics on it, but ultimately in a game like Clash, you're really going to have to build more around what the people around you have than what you personally think is the best. Because that's how multiplayer games work, where you have to coordinate with your teammates. And I think essentially that's pretty much covering my thoughts on this. If anyone has other thoughts, wants to tell me other opinions people have said, maybe something that you think I'm objectively wrong about, I would love to hear that. So definitely let me know. And with that, I'm going to end this video for now. Bye.